Welcome to the Hard-Won Wisdom Podcast with best-selling author Fawn Germer and corporate innovator Michelle Brigman. Come here weekly for career and life-changing conversations with some of today's most influential thought leaders, senior executives, and trailblazers who will share their mentoring wisdom. This podcast is brought to you by the Women's Leadership Network.
Hi, I'm Fawn Germer.
And I'm Michelle Brigman.
This is the Hard-Won Wisdom Podcast. Today, I'm down in the Keys on a camping trip, so a little informal for the YouTube watchers. And we are really lucky to have a guest today, Francine Ward, who's someone I met eons ago at a conference and was very inspired by and touched by. So I'm really happy to share her with you. Francine is an intellectual property and estate planning lawyer, but she also had a lot of success as a motivational speaker and author. And that's because of a very interesting story of rising right up out of the ashes. So Francine, thank you so much for being with us today. Welcome.
Thank you, ladies, for having me. Good to be here.
So, how do you summarize that kind of a story? Let's hear it, because it's an amazing tale.
How do you summarize it? Well, I will say generally my story I like to think is a true rags to riches, rags to overcoming challenges type of story. You know, I wasn't born into success, wealth, or health, actually. You know, I was born in the South. I'm 70 years old, which actually every time I say that, it's like, girl, are you lying?
Yeah.
Are you really telling the truth? But yeah, I am. I'm close to the 71 in January. But I was born in the Deep South during a time when Black men were being openly lynched. And you would see that on television. So with that as a background, I grew up believing that I was a nothing from the very beginning. I saw images of people who looked like me, whether it was on television, in the news, or whether it was in the movies or in a TV show. I grew up believing that I was worthless. And so that actually is the place where I start. You know, I come from a place where, you know, I believe that. And I also believe that if you are taught that you are worthless, eventually, unless you are really strong, unless you have a strong constitution, you will ultimately buy into that message. And I did. And so early on, as an escape through life, first it was books and movies. I still have lots of books on my bookshelf. My mom was a librarian, so I'm fortunate that books were an escape, books and movies. But at 14, I turned to drugs, you know, so I have a very sordid, very sad early life. I won't go into all the details, but drugs and alcohol were clearly a part of my early life. That was how I escaped feeling the feelings that I felt. You know, I'm very fortunate also that in my mid-20s, I was 26 years old when I came across a group of people who helped me turn my life around. And there has been no turning back since then. I haven't, you know, had a drink or a drug in my body in over 44 years. And honestly, the fact that I get to live a different life today is truly through the grace of God and some amazing people that I've met in my life.
Who were these people and how did they inspire you to do that?
Well, they're in different people in different places, but they inspired me by showing me through their experience, through their strengths, and through their hope, how I could get through anything, literally anything. And that has been the way I have survived a lot of different things in life. You know, not just the drugs and alcohol. That was the beginning. I had to stop drinking, stop using drugs, stop killing myself with chemicals before I could then move to a different place and start turning my life around.
And at what age was that?
26 when I stopped drinking.
So
and I'm 70 now, so there you go.
So that was a good, strong decision early on. Did you do it with AA or how did you make it happen?
I did it with a group of people. It's my understanding that in AA, they prefer that you do not disclose that affiliation at the level of press, radio, and film. So I don't talk about that. I don't know if that's what you're referring to. But for me, it was just a group of people who helped me turn my life around.
Yeah. Then you came up with this idea of esteemable acts. So share that.
So early on, one of the people who was instrumental in me changing my life was a woman named Louise. And Louise was really a tough old bird. I'll tell you how lucky I am that I met someone like her, but at the same time, I hated her because she just was like so hardcore. She knew who I was. She had my number. I was young. I thought I knew everything. And she said, girl, if you're going to get to a different place, you got to do some things differently. And, my self-esteem was in the toilet, as, one could imagine. I had a history that, drugs, alcohol, prostitution. It was a history. And she said, in order for you to be a different person, you need to behave differently. So she used to talk about self-esteem comes from doing esteemable acts. She said it doesn't come from thinking or feeling. It comes from behaving in a way that ultimately makes you feel good about yourself. And so she had me do some small things for starters, things that, even today people laugh at me over. I don't really care because my life has changed. But, one of the bad habits I had, aside from drinking and using, was I had a nasty little habit of wanting to put my paws on some other woman's husband or boyfriend. It's like I did it with impunity. I would think it's not my fault that he can't keep his pants zipped up. But Louise used to say, it doesn't matter how someone else behaves. It's how you behave. And other people can deal with all kinds of things. But you, as a recovering person, if you veer too far off the beam, you will start drinking again. And for me, my bottom was so low, I couldn't afford to backtrack. So she got me changing behaviors like not sleeping with other people's husbands or boyfriends, changing the way I dress. Today I look at the way some women dress, and honestly, the way I dress paled in comparison to some of the things I see on the street. But back in the day, for me, she had me dress differently, appropriately for an occasion. I used to wear, picture this, I used to wear hot pants, like even when they were no longer in style. I'm small, but I was really thin then. And I used to wear hot pants about 6 inches. Now, 6 inches does not cover much of anybody's skin. I'd walk into public places with see-through blouses and no bra. I mean, she said, this is insane. She said, no wonder you hate who you are. Look at how you carry yourself. And I had a filthy mouth. That was one of the other things for me. I know many people listening to this podcast, they use all kinds of language, and that's okay. But for me, she taught me how to change my language, how to use different words to describe how I feel. And today I'm someone that doesn't curse. I choose not to curse. I choose. And that actually, interestingly enough, is what got me to going back to school, because I had to look up words in the dictionary, and I started to take an interest in learning. So Louise was really powerful in my life.
Matt, I'd like to dig into this a little bit more because I'm very fascinated, especially when you're in a place of low self-esteem. People that come in and try to offer advice, it's real easy to discount them, not listen. What was it that she did that made you even open to hearing some really tough love? Was it what she said? Was it what she did? Was it what was happening in your life? Like, what was going on?
I got to tell you, I am not sure what it was about her, because I am off the streets of New York. And if you even looked at me crooked, I was out of there. You can't be judging me. That was my mentality. And I wouldn't tolerate it. I wouldn't tolerate it for men or women. So I don't know what it was about her, or maybe it was where I was at that moment in time. See, I choose to look at it that way. I think, today I believe very strongly in God. I didn't back then. But I believe that God puts God's preparing me and whoever that next person is I'm to encounter. And at the exact right moment, our paths cross. I believe I had to be ready to hear her, and she had to be there at the right time. Because honestly, I don't know why I listened to her. Because I considered her quite mean. She wasn't mean. She just refused to tolerate a lot of my bad behaviors. She loved me more than I loved myself. And so I don't know. But
So
whatever it was, I listened.
long term, what was the role that she played in your life? Was she there for a season or for the duration?
She was a mentor, someone that I had come across, and she's now gone. She's passed on. I had been without a drink, I think about 23 years when she died. And it was very painful. It was one of those very challenging moments, a defining moment in my life when I didn't think I was going to be able to continue. Not even just thinking about it, But I remember somebody said to me once that if you drink or take your life because Louise is gone, then everything she stood for becomes a lie. All the things you say that she's given you and she's taught you, if you take your life at that moment because she's gone, then what does that really say? So, and I've had several people who mattered pass away,
That is powerful. So you took that lesson that she gave you and turned it into a lesson for everyone else. So how do you suggest others apply that?
Which lesson are we talking about now?
Esteemable acts.
Oh, generally. So there are many things that come out of esteemable acts. I think one of the big lessons that came out of it that Louise encouraged me to practice and believe is not to give other people the power to define who I am. I think more than anything else, that I used to give people power to tell me who I was. If somebody said to me I was worthless, I believed them. If they said to me I was fat, I believed them. If they said to me I was stupid, I bought into that. When I stopped living the sordid lifestyle that I used to live, people would still judge me for being a former hooker. I mean, I was already a lawyer by that time, but people would still judge me. And I would get I would feel horrible. I'd go inward and I would just take in that negativity. And Louise said, you cannot continue to give people the power to define who you are. She said, people are always going to have an opinion of you, no matter who you are, no matter what you do. She said, if you become the best person in the world, people are going to hate you for that. If you will always find people who don't like you. So you cannot give them the power to define who you are. So that was one of the messages, one of the esteemable acts messages that she taught me. It was really powerful. But there's so many.
What's that like when you say, I was a hooker now? What does that say? And what's that do to you?
I have no energy around it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to say it in a public forum. And that was something that she helped me with, because what I discovered, I often have young women come to me for mentoring, and inevitably shame is the core of who they are because of how they live their life. And what I tell them is, if you keep doing the same things that you've always done, you will keep behaving and feeling the same way you used to feel. And so for me, one of the reasons that I do talk about my history so openly, number one, I don't live that way anymore. So honestly, I don't have that kind of energy around it. It's been many, 44 years. It's been many years. But the other thing is, I believe every time someone like me, who has so significantly changed my life, has the courage to talk about it, I give other men and women permission to step out of the darkness into the light. Because God, we all have something that we're ashamed of. All of us. I don't care who you are. Your history probably is not mine, but each of us has something that we wish that nobody would ever find out about, that we would die and go to our grave with. And so, I believe if I behave differently, I stop feeling the way I used to feel. So as over the years, it's those esteemable actions that got me to behave differently. So no, I don't have that same kind of energy. Do I believe that people judge me when I say it? Of course. Absolutely. There will be people listening to this or looking at it. Yeah, I get judged. But honestly, at this stage, it matters little. Otherwise, I wouldn't say it.
Yeah.
Do you remember the first time you told your story? And what was that? What helped you do it that first time?
Well, it was not easy. I was not able to talk about it like I do now, that's for sure. But the first time I talked about it, it was in a safe setting. So I was around other people who had been trying to change their life and had a history. But still, it was a little scary. But it was really scary the first time I said it in a business setting. That more because I wasn't around people who were changing their lives, that was the hard one. And the first time that ever happened, this is when I started doing a lot of motivational talks when my first book came out. I was living up in the Bay Area in California, and there was a huge conference we used to have. I don't even know if they have it anymore. It's called the Governor's Conference. And I was one of the invited speakers. And I think there were like 2,500, 3,000 women in that particular room. And I only had a short time to talk. I can't even remember what the topic was, but it was something that enabled me to talk about it. I think it had to do with overcoming obstacles. And so, I talked about, in passing, I didn't spend the whole time talking about it, but that was so frightening because I could look in the audience and see some of the faces of the women. Oh my God, talk about judgment and daggers. I could feel it. But, I knew at the end there were enough women who were so grateful because even though that was a business setting, they had their own, skeletons that they were grateful that I could talk about it. The next big time was at NSA and National Speakers Association, which is where I first met you, Fawn. I believe that's where we first met. And I was one of the main speakers at one of the conferences in San Francisco. That was scary because, again, it was a business setting. And, to look at me, people don't assume my history because I carry myself very differently today. And that was very frightening, very, very frightening.
I just think there's so much power in that because you're right. Everybody's got something that they think is so big and scary in their past and they don't want anyone to find out. And well, I don't have much because I'm kind of boring, but most people have got a lot. And to see someone who comes from that and then turns so successful and is not owned by shame or guilt on that stuff, that is liberating. And I'm shocked that people would be judgmental about it, seeing where you went after you left that behind.
Well, but not everybody's the same. And I also believe that sometimes when we judge others like that, there are skeletons in our own closet, and so everybody's got their own path. I no longer can invest a lot of energy worrying about it. If I did, again, I would never talk about it. I would just keep it a secret. But, I believe that there are enough people who need to hear that. And again, they need to hear it from someone like me. One of the things that I find for myself is I am always admiring speakers who come from a very authentic place. People who have gone through things and gotten past them to have a different life. Those are the people I really listen to. I very seldom anymore listen to people who are up on a high horse telling me how to do things and they have no experience. So,
Yes.
it's okay. It's all good. But
Well, the example you gave there was in an environment where you have sort of colleagues, acquaintances, strangers. What about as you started opening up about the people that were in your innermost circle, the family who maybe did or didn't know, or had implications on their life whenever you would share some of these things? I'm curious because I think a lot of times that's a lot of what holds people back too is, my parents, my spouse, my children.
Well, sadly, my mother and a lot of my family, because I grew up in New York, I drank and used drugs in New York. Most of my destructive behavior was in New York, although it also was in Vegas and Chicago. But most of my family, unfortunately, knew my history. I'd been arrested. They knew what I had. They knew who I was, and it was very shameful. I mean, just watching me as I deteriorated into this pathetic young woman. And I was young when all of this was happening. I mean, again, I got sober at 26. So I started using drugs at 14. I dropped out of school, left home at 18. I would have left earlier. But in New York at the time, the age of majority was 18. And I didn't want my mother coming after me. But I was on the streets, homeless at 18 years old, and my mom tried to have me arrested. I mean, she knew. It was very sad. At the same time, when I got clean and I started to change my life, my grandmother was still alive. I was 4 years without a drink when my grandma died in Atlanta. And then my mom watched me and then watched me in law school. So I made amends over the years, but it was very painful for all of my family. I mean, it was, people in the very beginning, when I was really little, used to say there was so much potential because I was smart in school. I was always in the one class. In New York, we used to have 1-1, 3-1, 5-1, 6-1, the top classes. But they gradually watched this person. And eventually nobody was looking at me saying, that girl has so much potential. She is going places. They stopped saying that, So, yeah.
So then how did you get the courage to say, I'm going to go to law school and leave all that behind?
So I was 2 years without a drink or drug, and I hated my life. I was in Vegas. I got sober in Vegas. I was dealing dice. I was dealing dice in the casino. I was a crap dealer.
And you were right in the middle of it too. What a difficult place to even stay sober with that. Oh my word.
That's an understatement. And I was on the table all night with booze, just smelling it. And again, I had a really nice support system. Thank God for that. And I was starting to believe in God when I was about 2 years sober. But I forgot where were we going? What was the question?
You made the decision to go to law school, which is a pretty big step from the craps table.
And it was. I knew I didn't want to continue doing what I was doing in a casino. I didn't know what to do. And again, the God of my understanding today is so sweet, so powerful, but so sweet. And this God kept putting people in my life as inspirations. I mean, I ended up meeting a young woman who had gone back to law school, who had gone back to school. She had a history. And, anyway, God kept putting people in my life so that I could pay attention to. And initially, I wanted to be initially I was looking for a profession that was really hard. And I'd love to sit here and tell you that it was just because I wanted to do something that was helpful. But the truth is, I needed to prove to the world that I was more than my body or my face. And so my initial thought was I wanted to be a doctor. I said, that was like super hard. But I'm afraid of blood, starting with my own. And there's no way I would engage in vivisection of an animal. I mean, when I had biology in school, I don't know how I got through it, because the idea of cutting up an animal is just so, I've cats all around here, as you can see one of them. So then the next hardest profession was law. And I grew up watching Perry Mason. So I thought, okay. And that's how it happened, honestly. I mean, for years I lied. And I said to people, I just want to help people, because that sounds really good. But as the years went on, I started telling the truth. I started being more authentic on every level in my life. And I just started saying I needed to prove a point. And then, of course, eventually I stopped needing to prove. And today I have no need to. But that's how it happened.
Yeah. What happens whenever you decide to be authentic with yourself and then authentic with others? Like, how did that change your life?
Well, I will tell you, it's never a straight line. It's never an easy journey. It is always hard because for me, getting to the decision is the hardest part of any decision that I have ever made. It's what goes on in my brain. My brain is still out to get me sometimes today. And I grapple with, should I do it? And how am I going to look? And what are people going to think? I mean, all that. I have a convention up there that just really is my enemy. So that's the process always. And then gradually, because I keep talking through it in my brain and I talk to people I admire. I talk to my mentors so I can hear myself. I also hear them. I get honest input. And I have chosen people like Louise. Louise is gone now, but I've chosen people for me who will tell me the truth. A lot of people don't want to hear the truth. I'm not one of them. I invite honest feedback. I don't always like what I hear. I don't always like when they give me they'll say, well, okay, this is what you want, but this is what you might want to look at. This could be the downside of a choice you make. I might not like that, but it always helps me because when I can look at the worst case scenario of a situation, it helps me really come to a decision sooner. And I'm that way even today with myself. I always look at the worst case scenario. A lot of people find that very negative, but that actually helps me because if I'm looking at the worst thing that could happen, then I'm preparing for it rather than being taken off guard because I'm looking at, I'm an idealist and I'm only thinking of, a rosy experience. No, I'm a realist. And so I want to know what's the worst case scenario so I can plan accordingly. So it's been a challenge, Michelle. Every decision is always wrought with not so fun stuff.
You have had a lot of worst case scenario situations.
I have.
Last several years. And that story is powerful as well. So let's go there.
Well, I've had many challenges throughout my life. Failing the bar was really difficult. I'm admitted to 3 different jurisdictions, 2 of the most difficult states of the Union, New York and California. I'm able to practice law. I'm admitted to District of Columbia. I failed New York twice before I passed it, me and John F. Kennedy Jr. Maybe some of your listeners might remember who that is. I doubt it, but maybe some of them. And then I came to California and I stopped counting how many times I failed that bar at 6. I stopped counting. And there were people who said to me, God obviously does not want you to be a lawyer in California. You should just give up. But, you know, I kept hearing Louise because she was not someone who said to me, if a door is closed, it means God does not want you to walk through it. No, she never said that. She said, if a door is closed, if it's seemingly locked, that means you need to find another way around it, under it, over it, or get a different key. And that has been my motto since that point. And that's why I'm a lawyer today, because I never gave up on that. Learning how to stay the course, even when things have been challenging, has been what I've had to deal with throughout. I remember when I published my first book, I never even got to the publisher. First, I'll say my very first book, it took me 10 years to write it because I was afraid of rejection. And then when I finally wrote my book proposal, the very thing I was afraid of is what happened. I got rejected once, twice, 5 times, 10 times, 15 times, 16 agents. I never even got to the publisher. 16 agents back to back said things to me like, who do you think you are? You're a lawyer. You're not a writer. Or they said, what are you talking about? Self-esteem. Number one, it's not a flavor of the month. And they said, who do you think you are to write on self-esteem? You're not a therapist. I mean, so I kept hearing that chatter in my brain. Fortunately for me, I had learned the lesson from Louise that you just don't give up. And I finally became willing to take feedback. Again, not always liking what I hear. I learned that from Louise, but I was willing to hear it. I got enough feedback that was positive. I did what they suggested. I eventually got a 6-figure deal from what was then Random House. Now, of course, it's Penguin Random. But I got a 6-figure deal, my first book, because I'm willing.
Big deal, because that is so rare.
Because I was willing to stay the course and take the suggestion. Those experiences have prepared me for many to come. And over the last 4 years now, you know, we all have had to deal with the pandemic. Everyone on some level had to deal with the challenges of COVID. I had to deal with a lot more, all in a short period of time. I am an animal lover. Number one, I love my cats, and my favorite cat at the time, and actually it's now 4 years since Mango was put to sleep. And I didn't even have an opportunity to grieve his loss when my husband of almost 24 years went into hospice. Richard had been suffering from cancer for about 18 months to 2 years. It started as esophageal cancer in his esophagus. It metastasized into his stomach, then into his bones. And by the time it hit his bones, it was only a matter of time before he made his transition, which is around now. It's almost 4 years. He passed away between Thanksgiving and Christmas in 2019. So this is a very challenging period for me for a number of reasons, and that's one of them. And then right after he passed away, I turned 67, so that was a rude awakening. And then right after that, the pandemic hit. And then right after that, my mom died of COVID. And then, you know, it's just been one. I put another cat to sleep. Kiwi was 16 years old. And then there was another cat that right after, actually last August, I had a procedure on my throat. I put Kiwi to sleep. A week later, I went and got my very first shelter cat in years. I got a rescue. A week later, Pumpkin was so cute. He was 3 months old. I got him from the shelter. Like I said, the first time in like 40 years that I'd gotten a cat from the shelter. I woke up a week after I got him. He was normally in my bed. I get up. He was under the side table. I went to rub him. His body was frozen.
Oh, my God.
he had something I had never heard of because I hadn't had a shelter cat in a while. Parvo, feline parvo. I mean, it's like it was one thing after another. But the lessons that I learned early in my recovery have served me. Things that Louise taught me, that you don't give up, that, you show up, you be as real as you can, you tell the truth about how you feel, you don't lie. When people would ask me how I felt when Richard was dying, I never, ever, ever used the word fine. I still don't use the word fine. I find it to be a default term. And so people were shocked with someone who had, someone like me who had the life I lived and who had not drank or used in so many years. I would tell them the truth. I'd say, I feel crappy. I feel horrible. I'm sad. I'm whatever it was. But I would never say I'm fine. And that was one of those esteemable actions that Louise taught me early on. She said, it doesn't serve anyone, starting with yourself, when you lie about how you feel. And then you teach other people how to lie. And even when you watch TV now, I notice I'm very acutely aware of how many women, especially women in, tough positions, or tough professions like law, medicine, their law enforcement professionals. You ask them how they feel, they're all fine. No matter what they're going through. They could have just been shot. They're fine. They could have just shot someone. They could have been raped. They're fine. And so we teach each other how to be fine, which is a really unhealthy place. No wonder so many women end up doing a lot of unhealthy things because they stuff their feelings.
Or you look at the mental illness going on right now, right? Prescriptions for mental illness. Yeah.
Francine, all of that loss and then the lockdown, and you were in California where the lockdown was worst of all. So what did you learn in that moment of utter aloneness?
Well, unlike a lot of people I know who were like freaking out when they had to shelter in place, they were complaining. I mean, here it was nauseating to listen to many of the women, especially that I know here. They were complaining they couldn't play golf. So that was like challenging for them. And I was thinking, people are dying and that's what they're thinking about. For me, actually, it was a period of respite because I was literally on the road every week. I was flying somewhere. I usually kept a suitcase packed because I was always away. And Richard used to say, where in the world is Francine? What time zone are you in today? Because I was always gone. And what the pandemic did for me was kept my body where my feet were, kept me here. And honestly, I had so much to deal with that it gave me an opportunity to deal with it. I was dealing with my husband. I mean, my husband had just died. So as a surviving spouse, I had a lot of work to do, a lot of work. Then I had to deal with my mom's stuff. I was the executor and I was dealing with her stuff 3,000 miles away. Plus, right before Richard passed away, we had sold our Mill Valley house. We were living up in the Bay Area in Marin County, and we had the Palm Desert house as a second home. We had sold that house, but we had boxes like overflowing in this house because, I mean, if he was sick, we couldn't deal with anything. And so I actually spent the better part of 2021 and part of 22 fixing my house up, cleaning out boxes, cleaning out closets, getting rid of stuff I no longer needed. So and there was very little work. So, nobody was spending money on a lawyer. They were trying to survive, take care of their own families. So I had really an opportunity to take care of some things that I needed to take care of at home. And I found myself really helping other people who needed help. I had a lot to deal with, but one of the things that Louise also taught me is it was important for me to be of service, to get out of myself. I am by nature selfish, self-centered, and self-absorbed. And if given half a chance, I will just do nothing but think about myself, because that's what matters to me. But, she taught me early on, and this was part of me staying sober. She said, in order for you to keep this gift of recovery you've been given, you need to give it away. You need to find opportunities to be of service to other people because you're so selfish. She just called it like it was. I hated her so much. I just hated her. And that has been how I function. Even during the pandemic when I didn't have a lot, I would share what I had with others because they had less than me. And that's what got me through it.
Beautiful. That is beautiful. I hate that we're running out of time here because Michelle and I have been messaging each other about how great you are behind your back. Yeah, we're talking about you behind your back.
Talking about you. You're not the only ones.
But it's all the beautiful things. There were so many things about this podcast that could be just tweetable quotes. Like I have pages of notes while you've been talking. Although I'm gonna pull 4 that just kind of really hit me. The first one I want to start with is the beautiful gift of self-love that you shared about being honest about how you feel. And I loved what you said about when you lie about how you feel, you're teaching others to lie as well. And that is such a disservice we do to ourselves. And I just, that one really hit. The other 3 were very powerful. Don't give other people the power to define who you are. And that you are such a strong example of that. The way you tell your story and fully embracing of these are all the triumphs and struggles that have gotten me where I am today. And I loved the advice of to get to a different place, you got to do different things. And I just kind of want to let that one sit there for a minute because it doesn't have to be a life-altering situation. People who don't like their job they're in, they're frustrated where their life is. Okay, you've got to do different things than what you're doing. So invest in figuring out what those are. And then you also I think this really spoke to me, the reminder to each of us that when you are authentic and honest and you tell your story, that you are giving somebody else the strength and hope and belief that better is possible. It was just so powerful. I don't have sympathy for your journey. I am empowered by your journey. And just thank you for sharing this story with us. And the wisdom and encouragement that you have is just a beautiful, beautiful session.
We keep talking, girlfriend. You are really the best. And thank you so much for being with us. I just can't wait to share you with the world. So thank you so much for being with us and hope we get to have you back again. This is just such a privilege.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, both of you. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for joining the Hard Won Wisdom podcast with best-selling author Von Germer and corporate innovator Michelle Brigman. Join us weekly for career and life-changing conversations with some of today's most influential thought leaders, senior executives, and trailblazers who will share their mentoring wisdom. This podcast is brought to you by the Women's Leadership Network. Visit hardwonwisdom.com for more on this podcast and for links to Fawn and Michelle's web pages and social media. Also, be sure to rate, subscribe, and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. We really appreciate that effort, and we'll see you next week.